This section is over monopolies. Before we start in our discussion of monopoly, let's talk about what is an industry and what is a firm. So an industry is a group of companies that are related based on their primary business activities. Similar businesses are grouped into industries based on the primary product produced or sold, and this creates different industry groups that can be used to isolate businesses from those who participate in different activities. So, some examples of this are the fast food industry, the cosmetics industry, and the auto industry. So when we talk about market structure, we determine market structure by how many companies are in that industry. And market structure determines what price a company can charge for its product or the market power of the company. The more companies there are, the less market power. The fewer companies, the more market power. So let's look at the two extremes. We recently finished our section on perfect competition, and now we are going to be looking at monopoly. Some of the attributes that we consider are number of buyers and sellers, market entry and exit. Recall that means how easy is it to open up a business or to close the business. We talk about pricing power, which means market power. If the product is homogeneous or heterogeneous, the type of competition that the firm faces, and the type of profit they can expect in the long run. So in looking at the number of buyers, under perfect competition, we see there are many buyers and sellers, and only one seller in monopoly. So that is the key difference. Monopoly has only one seller. If there are 2 or 3 companies in the industry, it is not a monopoly. It is an oligopoly. Looking at market entry and exit. In a monopoly, there are barriers to entry. That means that it's hard to break into this business. Now, it can be hard because there are natural constraints, which basically means that sometimes a company needs to grow to a very large size before it can lower its average total cost and become efficient. So that becomes a deterrent to other companies from entering into this industry. Ownership of resources is another source of monopoly. Patents, copyrights, and franchises also act as barriers to entry. So in this way, a monopoly can protect its market from other businesses entering that industry. With respect to competition, under perfect competition, as we saw, there are so many businesses that an individual firm basically cannot compete. They have to charge the market price. But under monopoly, since there's only one seller, that company can charge whatever it wants. So it basically has no competition and it has market power. Okay? Remember that market power means they have the ability to charge whatever they want. No substitutes for the product. That's another attribute of monopoly. In terms of profit, perfect competition, no long-run economic profit, only a normal profit. With the monopoly, there is long-run economic profit. So why do monopolies exist? As I mentioned, number one, there might be no close substitute. For instance, there is no close substitute for water. There is no close substitute for electricity. So if there's no close substitute and you own those resources, it makes it very difficult for another company to come into that industry. Barriers to entry are something that protects the firm from competitors. So a natural barrier is when a monopoly occurs when one firm can meet the entire market demand at a lower average total cost than 2 or more firms can. And then ownership of resources. The firm owns a majority, if not all, of a natural resource. And then legal barriers. So legal barriers are important to know. A patent is an exclusive right granted to the inventor of a product or service for 20 years. A copyright is an exclusive right granted to an author or composer of an artistic work. And public franchises are a right for a firm to supply a good or a service, such as the Postal Service. They have the franchise to serve a certain area. Okay, so now let's think about pricing strategy. There are two types of pricing strategies. The first one is a single price monopoly that sells each unit of output for the same price. The second one is the price discriminating monopoly that sells different units of a good or service for different prices. For example, movie theaters or airlines. So we're going to look first at the case of a single price monopoly. Now, the firm is the sole supplier of the product. Okay, so if the firm is the sole supplier of the product, there is no supply curve because the firm decides how much to produce. Now, in this example, we are going to take an example of a small town, and we are going to assume that there is only one place that makes pizza. Okay, so again, assumption, a very small town with only one pizza place. How much can that pizza place charge? So you would tend to think that that pizza place can charge whatever it wants because it is a small firm and it's the only one in that town. So ideally, you would charge $20, right? If you could charge $20 for a pizza, you'd be making a lot of money. However, at $20, nobody wants to buy it. Okay, so if nobody buys your product at $20, you are not getting any revenue. So according to the law of demand, remember the law of demand, price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. As a small pizza place, you could lower your price to $18. If you lower your price, you sell one pizza, and your total revenue is $18. Remember, price times quantity equals total revenue. But let's say you want to sell more pizzas, so you can lower your price by another $2. At $16, the quantity that you sell is 2 units, and your total revenue is $32. But still, you would like to have more revenue coming in, so you lower your price to $14. And when you lower your price to $14, you are selling 3 units, and 14 times 3 is $42 worth of total revenue. If you lower your price to $12, you're going to sell 4 pizzas. So 12 times 4 is $48 of revenue. But you want to lower your price more to $10. At $10, you sell 5 units. So 10 times 5 is $50 worth of total revenue. And this continues. You think, well, if I keep lowering my price, I'm going to sell more units, and my total revenue is going to go up. So you lower your price again to $8, and now you do sell more units. You sell 6 units. But what happened to your revenue? 8 times 6 is 48. Your revenue starts going down. Okay, so let's lower the price again and see if we can sell more. And we do. We sell more units. So 6 times 7 is $42. Our revenue continues to drop. We lower the price to $4, and our quantity is 8. And 4 times 8 gives us total revenue of $32. So here's 4 times 8, $32. Our revenue still goes down. Well, what about if you lower the price to $2? Now you're selling 9 units, but your total revenue is $18. So at $2, 9 units, and your total revenue is $18. And if you give it away for free, obviously you're not going to have any revenue. So take a moment to look at what's happened to the total revenue curve. As you lowered your price, your revenue increased, it maxed out, and then it started to decrease. So what is happening is that here the price effect of lowering the price is outweighing the quantity. But once you get to this point, the number of units sold at a lower price starts resulting in a decrease in total revenue. So let's take a look at this in more detail. Here we have our price and our quantity from the previous table and our total revenue. With price times quantity, we plot out our demand curve. Note the difference between the monopolist demand curve and the perfectly competitive demand curve. The monopolist's demand curve is downward sloping because the monopolist is the industry and they can set the price. What happens to marginal revenue? Well, we can see that marginal revenue changes as well. As we go from a price of $20 to $18, our revenue has increased by $18. So we have sold one pizza and we have $18 worth of revenue. Okay. Now we sell a second pizza at $16. So our total revenue, $16 times 2 pizzas is $32. What happened to our incremental revenue? Well, what is the change? Recall that the formula for marginal, always the same. In this case, we're taking total revenue 2 minus total revenue 1 divided by quantity 2 minus quantity 1. So 32 minus 18 is going to give us, and divided by 2 minus 1 is going to give us $14 marginal revenue. So by lowering the price from $18 to $16, that second unit adds $14 worth of revenue for us. Okay, now we are giving revenue up on the first unit, but we are gaining $14, so that makes it worth it. So we continue with this process, figuring out marginal revenue. As we go from 16 to 14 units, we're selling 3 units. 3 times 14 is 42. What is our marginal revenue? So this becomes our T2 minus our T1. So it's 42 minus 32. And that is going to give us 10. And 3 minus 2 gives us 1. So let me do this one again just for clarification. Okay. So our T2 is $42, and we're taking away the previous total revenue of $32 divided by 3 minus 2. And that is going to give us $10 marginal revenue. That means that we are getting $10 from the third unit that is sold. Okay. So the third unit is giving us $10 extra. And we continue this process. If we decide to drop our price to $12, the quantity we sell is going to be 4 units. We take our TR2 of $48 minus $42, and that's going to give us marginal revenue of $6. Okay. So I'm going to write over this. We do 48 minus 42 over 4 minus 3, and that gives us $6 of marginal revenue. So as we're going from the third unit to the fourth unit of production, okay, if we track this up here, whoops, we're going to get like $6 worth of incremental revenue. Okay, so then as we do this for each of these variables, we begin to develop our marginal revenue curve. So if I drop my price $2 more, I begin to see that my revenue is increasing. So I went from $12 to $10. I'm selling 5 units now. So 10 times 5 gives me $50 worth of total revenue. So definitely that's better than the previous amount. And my marginal revenue, well, my 5th unit only added $2 worth of revenue, right? So there's my marginal revenue. And I continue to do this. I drop my price from $10 to $8, and I sell 6 units. My total revenue is $48. Now you can see here my revenue is dropping. And what happens to my marginal revenue? It's now negative. So come over here. You see, as I go between 5 to 6 units, that extra amount that I'm producing is really taking away from my profit. So the question is, does it make sense to produce over here? And the answer to that is no. We are maximizing our revenue at 5 units. And somewhere between the 5th and the 6th unit, our marginal revenue drops below 0. So this is a point of interest to us because at this point, and this is an important thing to remember, total revenue is maxed. Write this in your notes. When marginal revenue equals 0. So somewhere between 5 and 6, marginal revenue is started to equal 0. And our total revenue is maxed at this point. So not at $8, at $10. My graph is a little bit off. Okay, so total revenue is maxed when marginal revenue equals 0. Okay. So from that information, we get some important decision rules. Recall from chapter 6, we were looking at elasticities. And we have 3 ranges of elasticity in our demand curve. We have the elastic range, we have the unit elastic range, and we have the inelastic range. Note that at unit elasticity, somewhere between 5 and 6 units, okay, our marginal revenue is equal to 0. Okay, and if we were to plot out our total revenue curve, we would find that total revenue maxed out somewhere between the 5th and the 6th unit. Now, this isn't going to be exactly precise because we would need to do this with calculus to find out the exact right point. Okay, but what pops out of this are some rules. Recall your total revenue rule. So for this company to maximize or to increase its total revenue in the elastic range, what does it have to do? Recall from total revenue rule, chapter 6, if price goes down, total revenue does what? Total revenue goes up. When you are in the elastic range, okay, so as a business person, sometimes it's handy to know, well, where are you on the demand curve? Are you pricing too high? Maybe you need to lower the price a little bit more to increase your sales. And of course, this goes the other way, right? If price goes up, what happens to total revenue? Total revenue goes down. Okay, again, when you're in the elastic range. So what are the implications? Okay, so at unit elasticity, well, at unit elasticity, total revenue is maxed, right? In the inelastic range of your demand curve, if price goes down, total revenue goes down. If price goes up, total revenue goes up. Okay. So these rules that we learned in chapter 6, okay, or on elasticities, become relevant here. We're looking at the total revenue rule. Okay. So what? A monopoly will never profitably produce along the inelastic range of the demand curve. So that's an important thing. Okay, it'll never profitably produce along the inelastic range of the demand curve, which means that if it's producing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 units, it's losing money. Okay, so that's an important note for you. So then we come to some decision rules, and the question is, well, how much should a monopoly produce, and how should it price? Well, the profit maximization rule for all industries is as follows. The output amount, how much they should make of a product, is determined always by marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Marginal revenue equals marginal cost. This tells you the amount of units that they should be producing. Now, in perfect competition, recall that price equals marginal revenue equals the demand curve. However, in monopoly, price equals the demand curve and is greater than marginal revenue. So just to recap a little visual on that, this is your demand curve, and this is your marginal revenue curve. Here is your marginal cost curve. So our output is determined by where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Okay, this tells us how much to produce, and it also gives us the marginal cost of that product. But what we want to know is how much to price and charge our customers. So that being the case, we're going to price on the demand curve. Why? Because there are people who are willing to pay more. And so we're going to price on the demand curve. Okay, compare that to the firm in perfect competition. Well, that's a terrible line, sorry. Where price equals marginal revenue equals demand, and that is your marginal cost. All of those are equal. And remember that the price is determined by the broader industry. Okay, the broader industry determines the price. Okay. All right, so it is useful to understand this concept because it will help you later on. Okay, profit maximizing output, marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Okay, price equals demand curve. So PM is the market price, QM is the market output. There's your average total cost curve. Recall that profit is what? Price minus average total cost times the number of units. Okay, that's profit. You all need to have that in your head. Okay. Another way to look at it is total revenue minus total cost. Okay, but in this case, we're looking at the marginal curves. So this part becomes economic profit for the firm. When an economist is earning zero profits, when a monopolist is earning zero profits, the situation is going to look like this. The market price is equal to the average total cost. Output level will still be where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But in this case, you can see that the average total cost, or the per unit cost, is equal to the price. Okay, so here are the steps for determining your output. Okay, so please follow them. I think that would be helpful for you later on. First, find the profit maximizing output by finding out where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Then, determine the profit maximizing price by extending a vertical line upward from the output determined in step 1. And determine the pure monopolist economic process by using one of the two methods. Find profit per unit by subtracting the average total cost of the profit maximizing output from the profit maximizing price, then multiplying the difference. So we're basically saying price minus average total cost times Q. Or we're saying find total revenue, so P times Q minus total cost. Okay, so those are the two ways to determine profit. Okay, so here's a problem for you to do. I'd like you to calculate the missing total revenue and marginal revenue amounts and determine the profit maximizing price and output for this monopolist. What is this monopolist's profit? So stop the video and take a moment to figure it out. So how are you going to do this? First, you calculated the marginal revenue. Okay, again, change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. These should be the numbers that you got. You're going to compare the marginal revenue to the marginal cost. So I've put marginal revenue here and marginal cost here. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So if I go down the first one, obviously that's not applicable. Here, my marginal revenue is 100 and my marginal cost is 45. So that means I'm getting more on that unit than it's costing me. If I produce 2 units, my marginal revenue is 66 and my marginal cost is 40. That means I'm getting more revenue than it's costing me. If I produce 3 units, I'm bringing in incremental revenue of $47 and my marginal cost is 35. So my revenue is greater than my marginal cost. I'm going to keep producing. Okay, I'm going to produce 4 units. The 4th unit brings me $39 of revenue, and it cost me $30 to produce, so that looks good. So I'm going to keep producing the 5th unit, but look right here, the 5th unit brings me in $23 of revenue, and it's costing me $35 to produce. So this means I would be losing money on the 5th unit. Okay, so the answer here is to produce 4 units, and the price is going to be $63. Now the question is, what are the profits? Okay, so the profits, how do we find that again? Price, which we know is $63. Let me jot this out. Price minus average total cost times Q. Okay, so we know that the price is $63 minus average total cost. So here's our average total cost graph. We're going to produce 4 units. Average total cost. Remember, average total cost, ATC, is the same as per unit cost. Okay, so per unit it's costing me $52.50 to produce. And I am producing 4 units. Okay, so what is the answer to that? So take your little calculator out, or you can do it in your head to figure this out. 63 minus 52.5. That's $10.50 per unit profit. And I am making 4 units. So my profit is $42. Okay. So let's look at an issue called price discrimination. Okay. When we talk about price discrimination, what we mean is that the business is discriminating or segregating its customers. And businesses do this all the time. Air travel does it. You know, are you buying your ticket a month ahead of time, 2 weeks ahead of time, 1 week ahead of time, same day. All those variables come into play. So they're basically saying, if you want to go from El Paso to Dallas and you want a low rate, take Southwest, for example, you might be able to find a low rate if you buy your ticket 2 months in advance. Okay, so say you're going to Dallas today at 3 p.m. And you buy the ticket today, it's going to cost you a lot more than if you had bought that same ticket 2 months ago. So in this way, they are discriminating against, or they're discriminating and targeting their customer base. Theater tickets do the same thing. Tuesday night tickets are cheaper than Friday night tickets. Senior discounts, military discounts are all ways to price discriminate. And businesses can do this because they're willing to pay. Customers are willing to pay, and businesses want to extract consumer surplus from that consumer. So 2 things are needed to be able to price discriminate. 1, you need to be able to identify and separate different types of buyers. Can you target your market? Okay, this is a marketing concept. And then sell a product that cannot be resold. For instance, an air flight at 3 p.m. today, once that airplane goes, it's gone. You can never get that back. So that airplane ticket cannot be resold after the event of after the airplane takes off the ground. As opposed to perhaps a diamond, which is, diamonds are also part of a monopoly, but diamonds can be resold. So you cannot price discriminate for products that can be resold. So the objective of price discrimination is to transfer and extract consumer surplus to the producer. Okay. So here, recall that we have profit maximization under monopoly, and we know that normally we would be producing at QM, and we would be pricing at PM. Okay, so that would be the profit maximizing price. And there's our average total cost and our profit. But here's the thing, we're leaving some profit on the table. So how do we extract that? Let me go back just a little bit. Okay, we're leaving some profit on the table, namely all of this piece right here, which we already know is what? Consumer surplus, right? So how do we bring this piece into the producer surplus? So the way we do it is we tap the demand curve. Okay, so here we have the same graph. I made it a little bit smaller so that you could see. Okay, a single price monopoly, there will be some consumer surplus left on the table, as indicated by the greenish sort of triangle. In price discrimination, the business is going to charge customers what they're willing and able to pay. So whereas PM might be the single price monopoly strategy, if a product can be segregated, for instance, again, airline tickets, if there's somebody out here who's willing to pay a lot more for first class business tickets, the airline is happy to charge them that. That's an extra value for not for the consumer, for the producer. The producer can charge them for the convenience of same-day tickets. If an airline sells a week ahead, they can sell at a slightly higher price, and they sell it at a higher price, and that extra value, consumer surplus, comes down to the producer, and so on. Okay, and in this way, by charging different prices, discriminating between your consumers or targeting your consumers, you are extracting the entire consumer surplus by changing the prices and looking at what consumers are willing to pay. Is monopoly efficient? Well, no, monopolies are not efficient because they take consumer surplus from the consumer and give it to the producer. And businesses often go to government to seek protection from from competition, because it's convenient for them to be able to extract all of this consumer surplus. Okay, so theoretically, if we were operating in a perfectly competitive environment, let's see, marginal cost, output would be over here. Okay, but since we're not in a perfectly competitive environment, the firm can extract all of that consumer surplus. Okay, and normally this would be the consumers, and this would be the producer surplus. But the firm is trying to take that away from the consumer. So in this way, we say that monopolies are not efficient. Okay, so here's just another diagram outlining that. Efficiency in a purely competitive market. So this is the industry right here. Okay, and price equals marginal cost equals the minimum average total cost. And the supply curve is the marginal cost curve. Over here in a pure monopoly, they're going to be producing here at QM and charging this price. So you can see that price B is definitely higher than the perfectly competitive output. Okay, so in this way, monopolies are not considered to be efficient and are often under investigation by the Department of Justice. Some of the things that are conducted are breaking up the firms through antitrust laws, regulating the firms, and sometimes they just ignore the firms and let the markets get rid of monopoly through new innovations. We do have some monopolies that are regulated, principally utilities. And also, of course, the Department of Justice does look into monopolies that have undue market power. So they look at setting a socially optimal price or a fair return price, especially with utilities, because those are needed products. So in this case, assume that we have the marginal revenue curve and demand curve for a monopoly. And the ideal pricing for the monopoly would be able to charge on the demand curve. Now, this is a regulated monopoly. Let's say this is electricity. Okay, so this looks like a fairly high price. The socially optimal price would be where the marginal cost curve equals the demand curve, as in perfect competition. However, you will note that the marginal cost curve is lower than the average total cost, and the demand curve is lower. So this would be losses right here for the firm. So then pricing will occur at a fair return price where at least a regulated monopoly can recover its average total cost. Recall that total cost includes a normal profit. Okay. All right, so that concludes our discussion about monopolies. Please let me know if you have any questions. Please make sure that you are able to work out, let me show you that problem that I gave you. Okay, this is probably part of your homework assignments, most likely will be on the test also. Okay, great. We will talk later. Bye.